Welcome to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by HAYVN, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. I'm your host, Nancy Sheed, and it is a delight to be here today with Melissa Bernstein. Welcome, Melissa.
Nancy, I'm so glad to be with you today. Can't wait to see where this conversation leads us.
For those of you who do not know, Melissa is the founder of Melissa and Doug's Toys, and as well as the founder, Melissa, I'm going to get that right, of Lifelines, and now an author of a book about entrepreneurship. So a lot to cover and unpack here.
Yes, there's a lot going on, not letting any retirement or grass grow under my feet.
Not at all. We're also very excited, Melissa, to have you join us for the HAYVN Her Story later on this month and sort of dive further into the conversations that we might not be having today. But Melissa, let's take it back. I am one of those parents that got the benefit or whose children were one of the beneficiaries of the Melissa and Doug Toys and raising kids here in Connecticut, realizing that you all were right there on our back door. But before we get to like being a toy maker, what did you want to be when you grow up? Like, I know you were very creative, but when you're sitting there in your days of high school, middle school, what did you think you were going to do when you grew up?
Wow. I think less than that. For me, it was all about one word, meaning. I was born with a very acute meaning crisis, kind of wondering, why am I here and what am I meant to do while I'm here? And I think while I didn't have an answer for that, and I feel that's very akin to a lot of people these days who are experiencing sort of this loss of meaning in today's world, in that state where I didn't know, I was really not a very happy person. So I think all I ever knew was I needed to do something that served people in some way and took something from my soul and brought it out in a way that could impact others. And I didn't know what that was. That's why I was in such a acute state of entropy and distress and despair, because I couldn't figure out what that was. But once I did, then I would say it was a way to channel the chaos into something that I could offer the world and perhaps bring them a bit of joy.
And I've got two angles I want to go. I'm going to hold for a second on the entropy despair, but you are using words that I'm going to make assumptions were not words that were in part of our vernacular, our regular vernacular, in just talking about what 20-year-olds were going through, or even 18-year-olds, or it sounds in your case, you were quite insightful even when you were younger than that. So entropy, despair, like, did those words have labels for you back then? Or were you still just figuring it out, knowing something felt like it was missing, or somebody wasn't talking about things the way you understood them?
Great question. No, I didn't know those words back then. In fact, I had no words for it. All I did was channel what was this interminable angst into creative forms. But the creative forms were so dark because it was just channeling all these questions I had and all this feeling of like, what's the point if I don't know what I'm doing here? And I couldn't seem to reconcile that against everyone around me who seemed so carefree and happy and enjoying life. And I wanted so badly to be like them. And I couldn't figure out, honestly, what was wrong with me that made me so full of angst when everyone else was so joyful. So I think I didn't have words for it, and I continually channeled it into creative forms. But unfortunately, and I didn't realize it at the time, the things I channeled it into were also super dark. And I believe early on when I tried to share those with people, they looked at me in horror, like, this is coming out of this little girl who looks like perfectly normal. What is wrong with her? And I got this sense that Melissa, never share those things because they are not going to be received kindly. So I think, the state was not one where I was aware. I knew I was not happy and I hadn't found that thing. but I had no idea how to verbalize it until much later when I started to understand what had been going on.
Right. I don't want to lose that track, but I want to sort of though move into the creativity, because I would say for those of you who don't know, Melissa and Doug toys, they are not dark. They are joyful. They are simple. They are natural. They're wonderful. They spark you back to the childhood that we had in terms of, and so can you just sort of walk us through how you connected creatively into toys, which kind of seems like the other end of the spectrum from what was going on internally? I
Yeah.
mean, did you just sit down and say, I want to make toys for kids? Or, I mean, was there an aha moment?
It's the biggest irony and biggest miracle, certainly, of my life that
Wow.
I, of all people, would end up making so many toys. And it really ended up coming down to existential philosophy. It's pretty deep, actually, because I think in my early life, I felt that I was governed by the darkness and that I had no capacity or power to do anything with it, that I was just a dark person who would always just create darkness from more darkness. And again, I was super creative, but it wasn't anything that could, I say it simply, complete the circle of meaning, right? I was
Mm.
creating and channeling, but I wasn't doing anything with it. It was staying in the dark recesses of my drawers and my pockets and under my mattress and never touching anyone in an impactful way. So I think I felt powerless to control the thoughts and the feelings inside me. But when Doug and I just serendipitously decided to do something on our own at 22 and 24 years old, and just dating, by the way, and I started to see toys in my head just out of, and I'd never thought about making a toy or making any physical
Right.
product.
It's not like you had kids and you were sort of like, oh,
And it's not
the
like
toys are
I
terrible.
even, no, I didn't even associate with being creative. I didn't take creative courses. I was the opposite. I followed a very linear career track that society sort of told me to do. So I think the minute I started seeing those toys, I had this incredible epiphany that, wait a second, my sort of inner entropy, that chaos that reigned supreme in me, could be channeled in two very different directions. It could be channeled into darkness, or it could be channeled into light. And I started to see this metaphor of a faucet, right? Where one side of it is all darkness and one side of it is all light. And that I actually saw that I had a choice. I could turn off the dark faucet and turn on the light faucet full force and channel that very same stuff in me into light, bright toys. And that was like mind blowing, because here I had this belief that I could only make dark things. And I realized that wasn't the case at all. I could take that very same creativity and channel it into toys. And once I started to do that, I felt like a breathing tube had been inserted into my trachea for the very first time, and I could breathe fresh air. And I realized that I did have this, what I call a blurse. I had this curse that I was born with this incredibly deep anguish over meaning and why we're here.
Right.
But I also had a blessing in that I could channel that darkness, transform it into light, and give people the result of that and bring them a little bit of joy. And now with Lifelines calm as well.
Right.
So I think that became sort of my purpose. And, you know, once I found that, I didn't take my foot off the gas pedal. To be honest with you, I put it down as deeply as it would go, full speed, and just rapidly created close to 10,000 products in 35 years. Like, it was such a deluge, honestly, that I couldn't even stop it.
I just want to dive into like the practicalities of that sort of growth for a business. We're going to get back to the emotional. We're not ignoring that, but I want to get back to the practicalities of a growth of a business that creates products in a time when we did not have the same or the lower barriers to entry of starting a business, right? From telecommunications, from media, from marketing, from production. And you just said this, you were 22 to 24. Like, you don't know what you don't know, but how did you go into launch mode? Was Doug the yin to your yang? Did you seek out, now there are loads of incubators and innovators and funding and all sorts of help and support people get. These days, that was not the case when you were launching or
No.
growing.
It was not the case at all. First of all, nobody started a company.
No.
It was very pre-professional. You went into a profession and you stayed at the company your whole life and moved up the ladder.
Exactly.
So nobody started a company, much less a toy company. People literally thought we had lost our minds. And honestly, I would have never done it if not for Doug helping give me the courage to do it, because both of us were on a career track right out of college.
Right.
And we were both, I was even more miserable than he was. I was like a flower without sunlight and water in what I was doing. And I was becoming so sad that I could barely get out of bed each day to do what I was doing, because I truly fell into that lack of meaning void in doing what I was doing. So he convinced me that there could be, because I kept saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I can't do this yet. I can't not do this. And what are my parents going to say? And I have to do this. And he was the one who said, we don't have to do this. And I said, yes, we do. And he said, no, we don't. So we went away for a fateful weekend and brainstormed ideas and ended up just settling on children and then settling on sort of products for children that could spark their imagination. And it was really just very slow, organic, nothing magical at all. Okay. And then building it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think we knew absolutely nothing. We had no skill in anything we were doing. And what I've learned, we were on this podcast called How I Built This, which became a very popular podcast with Guy Raz and all the stories. And we were right between Warby Parker and Patagonia. We were like episode 16, right at the beginning. And I wanted to listen to all of them to find out, if there were any similarities in our stories. And what I found was so fascinating. I share this with my young entrepreneurs who I mentor a lot. There was one very distinct commonality among all of us. And he's done hundreds of episodes now.
Exactly.
And it was that none of us knew anything about what we were doing. Absolutely nothing. And therein was the reason we succeeded, because we didn't go into it. Because people always say, but I know nothing about what I'm doing. And I'm like, yay. And that right there is the reason you will succeed, because you will do it differently and you will do away with all the ridiculousness that just happened because people did it one way, and you will reinvent the model. And that's what we did, because we knew nothing, because we were complete neophytes in toys and the industry. We did things so differently. And we were thought of as the little kids who were kind of renegades. Like, all the older folks would come over and say, oh, isn't that nice? Until one day we suddenly sort of upended the model. And suddenly it was like, wait a second, what have they actually done here?
Exactly. But, I'm not Guy Raz, but I would say that is a very common theme in my conversations with people here in the same podcast. It was like, oh my God, if I'd known, oh my God, if I'd known what questions to ask. And they'll say, okay, it might have taken a little less time or whatever. But for the most part, that is very much a common theme. Or they jump from, I knew this world and I jumped into this world. And I'm really glad that I didn't do, I'm just glad I jumped. Because if I had to slowly, and even if there was a slow grind or a slow hustle, it's still with that enthusiasm of, don't tell me what I don't know, I'll figure it out, but we're moving forward. So I appreciate that. And to your point, Melissa, when they suddenly said, oh my gosh, what have you guys built? What was your sort of exit journey? Because I know it was a company that had your name on it, but then it went to a point, right, that it wasn't your company anymore. And what was that like when you knew it was time for that to happen?
Yeah, that's a whole book in and of itself. But I would say it was an incredibly painful, sad journey that wasn't really intended, honestly, on ending the way it did.
Okay.
So, but I think we made choices and luckily for 20 years, Doug and I bootstrapped the company.
Yeah.
It was 100% ours, and nobody did anything. We didn't have a board. We basically did exactly what we wanted. And then, we needed some money because we needed to get to that. We were at an inflection point, honestly, after 20 years. We were a big company, and
you were
then, not big. I would say we were a decent size, but we needed to go to that next level and hire up and wanted to do some acquisitions and a whole bunch of things. So we took on an investor, never realizing that ultimately, I mean, that investor was fine and the next investor was fine. But ultimately, when you get in that ROI model, it doesn't end well. And we didn't really know that going in. So it ended up that we sold the company ultimately.
Those are two very different words.
Yeah.
One has feeling and one has a lot less feeling, right?
And it was funny on the day that it closed, because it closed for a huge sum. People were congratulating me. And it was literally the saddest day of my life. So it was funny. It was that, again, was another irony. And I remember telling my son, I was like, it's so funny. People are congratulating me when nobody has any idea that it's really this painful. But the phoenix rises from the ashes. And part of my journey in really understanding what it means to live a meaningful life, because I took my meaning crisis and turned it into a lot of education on meaning. And I'm now a meaning coach that coaches people voluntarily for meaning. So part of it is basically believing there's unconditional meaning in every single thing and finding the silver lining in everything. So as the phoenix rises from the ashes, I really felt myself like I am going to make this a positive, because many would not get out of bed after losing the company they started at 22 and 24, our first child, something we put every ounce of like blood, sweat, and tears into, spent so many nights crying under the covers, huddling that we wouldn't make it. And I mean, it was a journey of 30 plus years. Wow. And I think to lose that could do you in.
100%.
But we started again. And we started a new company. We now have like 40 people. And it is everything and more that Melissa and Doug was. And I'm making products that actually, I never thought I'd say this, resonate much more with me than toys. And I am having literally the best time of my life. So if you ask me today, is it a good or a bad thing that happened? I would say absolutely only a positive. And I never would have imagined it, but am I so grateful that it happened? Yes.
And you're speaking of Lifelines, which we mentioned, founded also by you and by Doug. And in the meantime, I'm reading, you've had kids. This isn't like oh, by the way, you only just launched a company. You've had full life's long way. But at what point, again, in Lifelines, which is a very different company than a product that you're building, where this is about relationships and this is about people and this is about meaning. Can you walk us through sort of the when the light went off for that, or was it a brainstorming, or was it days or weeks of being in bed after the sale of your company in terms of what next? Was this idea floating in the back of your head of all right, if I'm not making toys? It's just such a shift, a positive one, obviously.
Well, there is an update on that shift. Actually, Lifelines is a consumer products company now.
Okay.
And we have over 100 products. So it is only similar in that we make products that we sell to retailers and they sell to consumers.
Give an example of what a product is, just so listeners understand.
Yeah. So our hero product, the best product I've ever made, and my favorite that I use every single day, is called Flow Art. And it's a guided art meditation pad where you get 20 scenes of art that guide you in this meditative way so that you access flow state. And it's really incredible. So we have probably 25, 30 different pads that come complete with all the tools you use with the pad. So that's one of many products that we make. But yes, we started very differently. It started really just as my own journey and a memoir I came out with that was called Lifelines, and like a journey where we developed a community. And for a couple years, I gave workshops almost every day, free workshops, of course, to people about topics no one talks about, like loneliness and perfection and martyrdom and meaning, and found it so healing because it was during COVID. And there were times at the beginning we had like 1,200 people join these group sessions, which by the way, I'm an introvert. I'm a weird, like quirky creative. I had no business leading these workshops.
But you had meaning.
Which was kind of comical. And that ultimately wasn't, never intended on being a consumer products company. But I think in my own journey, I realized that my senses were this portal to well-being and learning how to ground myself. Because again, being as highly sensitive as I am as a creative, I can go really high into the clouds of white space where I create, and I can go really low into the bowels of nihilism and meaninglessness. So I need a practice of grounding right here in the middle where I am okay. And I was looking for these physical tools to help me ground. And I was going online trying to find them, tools that could sort of delight my senses and bring me to this homeostasis that I was seeking. And unfortunately, the way products come into life is you either find a gap in the market where nothing lives, or you have a consumer experience with something that does live that is flawed in many ways. And I had both. I started buying things and I didn't like what I was purchasing. And I started seeing like, this is what I'd like. And I would look it up and be like,
doesn't exist.
Well, I'd like this. Doesn't exist. And very slowly, and I kept saying, no, not going there, not doing this again. This was the hardest slog ever, harder than anything. We are not doing it again. But unfortunately, the way that ideas live is they become real and they start to have a heartbeat and a very loud voice for this manic, crazy creator. And they talk to me and they say, Melissa, if you don't create me, I'm going to die. And you don't want to be the one to kill me. I mean, they get very, very desperate, to be honest. And these ideas started getting louder and more desperate and more of them. And suddenly it was like 30 linear feet that was yelling at me in unison, saying, create me or else. And one day I tapped Doug and I said, Doug, I have good news and bad news.
Oh, by the way, it's COVID. Oh, by the way, it's COVID. And
I guess I think I have a good premise and like a really good category that doesn't exist and is very needed right now, because I know that I want these products more than anything and no one's making them. The bad news, we're going to have to have a company. So he would do anything for me. And coming out of Melissa and Doug, I was so sad. I was really despondent, because I had lost my lifeline of creating. And although I was doing workshops and it's like physical form that I really need, I need to be able to see the result of all my darkness and hold it and say, like, I can make something good out of this that really, like, I need it every single day. Unfortunately, it's my medicine and it's the only medicine I take and the only medicine I need, but I need it. So he knew that I was not in a good way. So he agreed, and I couldn't, he's half of the equation. Like, I have the ideas, but without him building the infrastructure around me, nothing would happen.
I love the nod to partnership. It just makes it feel less lonely, and it makes things feel more doable. Melissa, you mentioned an update, so I want to circle back. You said there's an update on something, so I want to make sure I didn't miss something.
The update is just that people who knew us early on as Lifelines thought we were, a community and relationships and talking about, and we were, but we did pivot pretty dramatically, because as I started, I loved the connection and I loved the community aspect of it. But the truth is, for me personally, I need to channel it into physical products. And that's when it really started to take on sort of a new life, when I started seeing these new category of products, sensory delight, sensory immersion products, and bring those to life.
Okay. We could talk forever because, now, one, you were coming out of COVID when that happened. Two, now in this day and age of AI where there's nothing, it's all in the ether, and we're losing our sense of creativity and we're defaulting and we're giving it away. I could only imagine that your product and the necessity of having these opportunities, or to your point, like it's a need. I just said this to somebody the other day. I said,
A need.
it used to be part of your creative writing class would be like a nice to have. I said, but now being part of your creative writing class, it's a muscle. It's like exercise. If we are not creating, we're in big trouble. I mean, like back to your point of existential, like that pen to paper or that manually creating something with your hands, or we're
It's
giving it
so
all
true.
away.
And
It's
we've
scary.
studied it. So we've studied the science of it. We have a science advisory board for Lifelines. And, hunter-gatherers in those days, people weren't depressed. They weren't anxious because they were using their hands. And using your hands actually releases dopamine, the feel-good hormone. So when we create, it does something chemical to us, very positive and very uplifting. And that is why I am such a advocate, and I've created my whole life. And it's the only time that the anxiety eases, when I'm literally doing something. And I'll share another thing. My grandma used to always knit, like continual rabid crochet. I guess it was crocheting and knitting. And I would always be annoyed with her because I'd want her to play cards with me or do something. And one day I said, "Grandma, why do you always have those stupid knitting needles in your hands? Like, it drives me crazy." And she said, "Busy hands, calm mind." And that was 50 years ago.
Wow.
And it stayed with me. And we actually use that moniker now with our craft items with Lifelines. We say busy hands, calm mind. And I think it's very true. If you keep busy doing, engaging in really creative things, it will help ease the anxiety of living.
Exactly. As I'm thinking about how much faster I could talk to my computer to get it to give me answers and not use my hands. I want to, Melissa, your current book that came out in December, I know I'm leapfrogging a little bit, but it's called The Heart of Entrepreneurship. And I know that you're actually like also teaching entrepreneurs, again, in that way of learning. How is your view of entrepreneurship different, or what are you telling people that is different than what they're going to go hear? And like we said, their innovator cohort or their whatever, you purposely use the word heart. The cover is very playful. What's your core message in successful entrepreneurship?
It's a great question. And I think Doug and I started an incubator at Duke University in 2013. So we've been mentoring entrepreneurs for a long time now. It's our 13th class. And I've been mentoring entrepreneurs aside from that, especially women. I'm a real fan of women so I've seen, right? I've seen entrepreneurial ventures and why they succeed and why they don't firsthand. And what I realized is that we all harbor ideas in our heart, right? We all have that song inside our heart that longs to come out. But most of us never go there. Most of us die with our song still inside us. I think that's a Henry David Wallace quote or throw, but it's a jumbled one. But I love that. I love that metaphor. It's a very sad metaphor that most of us never let anyone see what really exists in our hearts because we're terrified that if we bring that thing out into the world, that we will be rejected for it. And I know that feeling because I created 10,000 products. And every time I brought one out to the world, I felt that fear, right? The fear that the consumers who are voting with their wallets will say, "Sorry, Melissa, that stinks. I don't want to buy it." So this book is about that. The premise is that we all are creative. We all have that song inside our hearts. And it is, what is that recipe? What is that unique recipe to take that thing in your heart? Or if you don't know that thing, how to find that thing that is your sweet spot, your gift, and how literally step by step, how to bring it out to the consumer in a way that they will be clamoring to either use or purchase it.
You make it seem so doable. You make it seem so like fun and
It's
exciting
very
versus
doable.
scary and overwhelming.
The book came out of, I am the entrepreneur in residence for this amazing group called the Inner MBA. That's a venture between LinkedIn and Wisdom 2.0 and Tammy Simon of Sounds True. And she brought me on to create a curriculum. It started as a 6-part series on how to talk to all these wannabe, soulful idea people and entrepreneurs. And that 6-part series is what became the book, because I realized that so many people were desperate for this. Like the sessions were so soulful. They were probably one of the best things I've ever done. And the questions were so heartfelt. And the people were like, but tell me, how do I get the courage? And and it made me realize that like we all need this and we all need these lessons. And I wanted to share it to a wider audience than just the people who paid for that particular course.
And they also, I assume, are timeless. It doesn't matter whether there's AI or not AI. It doesn't matter if there is, where you're producing, right? Like, I mean, if these are lessons you were teaching 2013, these go beyond sort of what your environment is, I'm going to assume.
Well, they're also life lessons.
Exactly.
My life, the 2 things that really saved me, I guess you could say 3, but 1 is creativity, 2 is meaning, and 3 is spirituality. So the book really focuses on meaning through creativity. And that's why it's called The Heart of Entrepreneurship, because you can be an entrepreneur without heart. Like you could say, I'm going to open a franchise, and there's nothing wrong with it. By the way, I'm all for entrepreneurship. I love entrepreneurship. And there are many entrepreneurs that don't bring it to their heart. It's all in their head. It's a business, right? They're like, our town needs a cleaners, and I'm going to open a cleaners, and they do it and they're very successful. This isn't for them. This is for people who want to start here at their heart and bring something out that's very, very heartfelt and authentic.
I'm taking a deep breath. Again, we could chat for hours. I'm so excited. We have more time to have conversation in a few weeks at the HAYVN Her Story. Melissa, I feel like this is just the tease. Thank you so much for your time today and sort of whetting our appetite for a deeper conversation about meaning and creativity, which we all need more of. If people want to reach out to you, Melissa, and find you or learn more, what's the best way to reach you?
2 ways. Our website is lifelines.com.
Okay.
And we have everything there, but we also sell through all major retailers and every little store as well. We love specialty independents. We sell to Target, Walmart, Amazon, you name it. We're everywhere pretty much, but also the little retailers too. They're going to have a really great selection. And I personally am Melissa at lifelines.com, and I love to respond to one person at a time and make them feel like they matter. So if anybody has anything they want to talk about, it can go anywhere. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you for being so open, so vulnerable, so generous in your storytelling. I can't wait to reconnect in a few weeks. Thank you for being here.
I'll bring some products so you get to see also what we're doing at Lifelines.
Perfect. It's going to be great. Thank you, Melissa. Love this time and looking forward to more.
Me too. Thanks, Nancy.
And that's another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. If you like what you hear, please give us a like, share this episode, make sure you're a subscriber, and we always love reviews.
Thanks for listening to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. HAYVN is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. HAYVN is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the HAYVN community online at hayvn.com. That's HAYVN.com. HAYVN Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.